So, I am continuing the reading of the book entitled Transactionalism by Trevor J. Phillips. I am reading Chapter 2, Transactionalism Viewed Historically, and I am going to be reading the sections about Newton, Maxwell, and field theory today. Newton. John Dewey has made the penetrating suggestion that the great contribution of Isaac Newton was his revolutionizing of the then existing cosmology through the attribution of self-action to all ultimate physical beings, that is, to all atoms. Thus, they would no longer have the same external fixity of being and inherent structure that in the Aristotelian and classical cosmology had belonged exclusively to God or to the stars. Expressed in different terms, self-action lost its unique qualities of reality and donned the mundane garb of phenomena. To Newton has been attributed the establishment of the full interactional systems of mechanics, an interaction, however, that manifests itself as a cause-effect relationship within the system and not within the object or particle itself. In order to further comprehend this statement, it is necessary to recur to the findings of Galileo. It will be recalled that he had arrived at the discovery that once a mass is set in motion, it continues in a straight line, if not interfered with by other masses. That is, its motion is not attributable to nor dependent upon the continued push applied to it by an actor. This discovery brought with it a new approach to the cosmology of the time. Isolated entities had been replaced by interdependent systems in the universe. This work of Galileo became for Newton the first law of motion. Every body continues in its state of rest or of uniform motion in a right line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces impressed upon it. What is actually involved when forces are impressed upon a body is succinctly expressed in the third law. To every action, there is always opposed and equal reaction, or mutual actions of two bodies upon each other are always equal and directed to contrary parts. It is in those cases in which such action and reaction, as described in the latter law, tend to bring into existence a system where before there was separation, that interactions occur. In the world of the physical, interactions occur because the structurally unchangeable, it seems probable to me that God in the beginning formed matter in solid, hard, impenetrable, movable particles of such sizes and figures and with such other properties and in such proportions to spare as much conduced to the end for which he formed them. These particles change direction and velocity when they act upon one another, but their basic properties remain immutable. For Newtonian physics, then, the world was a process comprised of simple forces exerting themselves between unalterable particles. Space and time were held to be absolute, the formal framework within which the mechanics of interactions took place. It would be several centuries before all the components of a total event were considered in system, that is, were available for observation and report. Such a view would be labeled the transactional, actually an assertion of freedom from the frozen type of actor or of material physical thing of fact. Modern contributions, Maxwell. To the physicist J. Clerk Maxwell is attributed the first modern utilization of the term transaction in a non-economics context. Writing in his significant book, Matter in Motion, Maxwell, not unlike Polybius, warned against a one-sided approach to the investigation of phenomena. For if we confine our attention to one of the portions of matter, we see, as it were, only one side of the transaction, namely, that which affects the portion of matter under our consideration. And we call this aspect of the phenomenon, with reference to its effect, an external force acting on that portion of matter, and with reference to its cause, we call it the action of the other portion of matter. The opposite aspect of the stress is called the reaction on the other portion of matter. In this excerpt, Maxwell indicated the aspectual characteristic of physical transactions as opposed to the elemental field, as has been shown by Newton and earlier researchers. Einstein and Infeld have drawn further distinctions between the classical Newtonian view and Maxwell's contribution. Given Newton's laws and the forces acting, for example, between the Earth and the Sun, the motion of the former can be ascertained. Thus, its motion and the Sun's distant action on it are connected through these laws, and both Earth and Sun are identified by Newton as actors in the play of forces. In Maxwell's theory, however, such material actors are denied. The mathematical equations of this theory do not, as in Newton's laws, connect two widely separated events. They do not connect the happenings here with the conditions there. The field here and now depends upon the field in the immediate neighborhood at a time just past. Field theory. Throughout the 2 centuries following the work of Galileo, up to the middle of the last century, all scientific creation endeavored to emulate what today is labeled the Newtonian construction, the describing of all natural phenomena in terms of simple forces between unalterable objects. But as Maxwell had indicated, the notion of transaction introduces the radical view of a cooperation of the powers of the opposing aspects in a given situation within a common interaction, transaction, a participating by all parties. The field referred to by Einstein and Infeld above is further elaborated upon by them as follows. Any physical field theory of most general scope will, when once soundly secured, show itself to be a process of knowing, as clearly as it shows itself to be a system of the known. The impress of the physical knowing will be upon the physically known, and the status of each will depend upon that of the other. This contention that the status of the knowing and the status of the known are mutually dependent is the underlying assumption of any field theory. Whether this be operative in physics, the behavioral sciences, or psychosomatic medicine, the concept of field is conveniently considered in association with the problem of causation, which is itself linked with the self-action, interaction, and transaction presently being investigated. Man has consistently framed his questions and answers concerning the world around him in terms of a cause or causes. For example, primitive man assigned spirits and gods as the causal agents of the identifiable phenomena. Such animistic tendencies satisfied for countless centuries mankind's desire to know. With the growth and development of the scientific method, the animistic system of ideas was replaced by the notion of cause and effect, and the additional concept of impersonal force. In the biological and social sciences, it was realized that to seek for causes or causal agents is to ignore the crucial role of the organism in the production of particular biological or social events. In the case of living organisms, and especially human beings, the so-called causal agent appears to be primarily a stimulus to the stored-up energy of that organism, expended in patterns appropriate to its structure and condition or state at the moment of impact. The implication that determining causes may not hold the clue to the meaning of events. Instead, attention may have to be paid to the energy complex and the means of energy transformation if an understanding of the events is to be achieved. In physics, too, there has been a movement away from causal formulations and a conviction abroad that antecedent events must make way for configuration in space-time, which exhibits the event of process under surveillance. It is becoming evident that the abandonment of the causal orientation, that with the abandonment of the causal orientation, man is able to be viewed as an organism constantly behaving in accordance with what the situation means to him. The meaning of meaning is, in consequence, of great concern to the student of human behavior. The field theory, in physics and elsewhere, should now be viewed in this context. When it is so viewed, it is seen as the latest advance in the history of causation, animism, to cause and effect, to configuration of interacting phenomena. A field is regarded in terms of new structural aspects within which the behavior of individual particles or organisms may be predicted, even though predictability itself may be merely a question of statistical probability. The introduction of the field concept into scientific realms marked the closing of the animistic era. The situation or the context in which organisms found themselves began to predominate. In the present study, these terms are employed as synonyms for field. And what is implied is that the qualifier, conditions under which, be substituted for the older archaic causal view. Self-action, interaction, transaction. Before examining some of the pragmatic antecedents of the transactional movement, it would be profitable to examine in greater detail and in a single section the three approaches to metaphysics already referred to in this study, and to further indicate the relationships that exist between them. Self-action firmly establishes a knower, located in or at or near the organism to do the knowing. Having established such a knower, it is essential that there be something to know. However, the knower is removed from it, being elevated to the status of superior power, a spectator man, and the something to know is separated from the knower by being made to appear as real as he is, but an inhabitant of a different realm. Thus, the doctrine of self-action, investing as it does organic and inorganic dwellers of the universe with what Whitehead has called independent individuality, ignores the interconnections which exist, asserting instead that each substantial thing is complete in itself. Theoretically, self-action maintains that higher beings are self-acting, perfect, that, as was seen in an earlier section, certain entities such as heavenly bodies have inherent capacities for activity, which enable them to act under their own powers. Although scientific reports on physical matters no longer reflect this treatment, it will be shown that in the following chapter, that all the spooks, fairies, essences, and entities that once had inhabited portions of matter now took flight to new homes, mostly in or at the human body, and particularly the human brain. To refer to mind, faculty, or IQ, for example, however unconsciously or unwittingly, as actors in charge of behavior is to apply the self-actional approach. Transactionally, such ordinary everyday behaviors would be considered without this subjection to private mentalities. and a more comprehensive projection of all aspects of the situational phenomena would be striven for. Interaction has reference to the action upon one another of structurally unchangeable particles, which, although able to alter direction and velocity when they so act, retain nevertheless their primary properties, which are immutable. It is a point of view that maintains that action occurs among independent entities, themselves unchanging and unchangeable. An approach which views the situational world as one in which all particles and objects are balanced against one another in causal interconnection. Newton's third law of motion, that action and reaction are equal and opposite, is a succinct representation of this view, which further presupposes a limited linear system regarding all knowers, knowing, and knowns, as separate entities bearing a rather simple cause and effect relationship to one another. One of the outstanding instances of the interactional approach concerns the operation of stimulus and response, which are held to be isolates and to demonstrate a causal relationship. They are examined further in Chapter 4. As opposed to the relatively closed treatment that the self-actional and interactional approaches demonstrate toward natural phenomena, the transactional is more free and open. In contrast to the two former treatments, the transactional view seeks enriched descriptions of physical phenomena or of primary life processes in their environments, and of the more complex behavioral processes in theirs. The phrase enriched descriptions is a highly appropriate one. It will be recalled that Galileo's research involved this very enriching of the descriptions pertaining to motion. It was the Galilean and post-Galilean physics which disposed of the distinction between the heavenly and the earthly, thereby extending the field of natural law to embrace the hitherto untouchable reality which finally was being regarded as a natural phenomena. It is the enriching of the general description of phenomena which advances man's knowledge through the gradual eradication of the mysterious and the rendering natural the supernatural. This is the method employed by the transactional view, a method and a view that admit of no bifurcation of reality, but maintain that all phenomena can be made to yield to description, however tentative such description may be. Previous sections have been concerned with the contributions of the sciences to the growth of the transactional point of view. Their purpose has been to indicate how a self-actional approach gave way historically to an interactional interpretation with the locus of the self-actional changed, and how in turn the notion of cooperative process or transaction emerged as a natural treatment of phenomena. It is now appropriate to examine some of the immediate philosophical antecedents of contemporary transactionalism and to indicate their contribution to its formulation, which we will do next time.